Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here at my next Star Wars review. This one is going to be my review for the novel Star Wars Before the Awakening, which is written by Greg Rucka, and the illustrations in the book are by Phil Noto. So yeah, what this book is, first of all, before I get into talking about it, based on the title you can probably get the idea. It's a basically prequel lead-in to The Force Awakens. The book is split up into three sections. First one's on Finn, second one's on Rey, last one's on Poe. So effectively you get a third of the book focusing on each character. Basically the events leading up to why they're doing what they're doing at the start of The Force Awakens. So for Finn, it's explaining his kind of struggle with his conscience, being, just about to be sent out on some of his first missions as a stormtrooper, going down to Jakku is basically his first big mission, and how he's struggled with his conscience before then, and he's kind of realizing he's in the wrong place. He's not one of these people. That's kind of what Finn's is about. Rey's is a little bit different in that her story basically takes place over the course of a year, and it's about basically links up with the whole Unkar Plutt thing, in that she is scavenging for stuff, and she happens to come across basically a full ship that needs a lot of repairs, but can be made into something that she could sell to Unkar Plutt for basically a lifetime supply of food, a lifetime supply of portions, as you see in the movie. And it's all about her, and then later two other scavengers come on board to help her put this ship together, and they're all going to have this be their kind of big thing that kind of, I suppose, frees himself up from needing to really work for food for a while. So that's cool. And then Poe's is probably the most interesting of all, because we learned the least about him in the movie. So if you're a fan of Poe Dameron, read this book. Like, the section on him is really good here. It explains his origins as the son of two veterans from the Civil War between the Empire and the Rebellion, and how he was part of the Republic Navy initially, and how he becomes disheartened with what they're doing about the First Order, and his gradual kind of shift into becoming part of the Resistance. So you get a little bit of a better understanding just from this book about what the whole Republic Resistance relationship is, and a little bit about the First Order as well. So it covers a lot of ground here. I think it's a pretty good prequel. I don't think it's like mind-blowing in that like you get all these massive reveals, but just in terms of, like, especially for characters like Poe, who you don't learn a lot of background really about, it's really like, it gives you an extra grounding in who his character is. With Finn, it better explains his decisions early on in The Force Awakens. And for Rey, I think better explains kind of what her key arc is in the movie as well. So that's basically what the book is, and my general kind of non-spoiler impressions on it. I really like it, and definitely if you're a fan of these Star Wars novels, especially now that like everything coming out now is canon, definitely check these out. But the rest of this video is going to be spoilers. I'm going to be talking spoilers about The Force Awakens the movie. I may even bring in stuff from The Force Awakens novelization, which I don't know if I'll do a separate video on that. I don't think I need to. But definitely those two, and then I'll obviously be spoiling this book. So just be aware of that. Please turn off the video if you don't want spoilers. But anyway, let's start with the Finn section of the book. I'll actually also mention here the illustrations you do get. There's about 2 or 3 per part. Mainly it's just one picture of each of the characters, and then one kind of more plot focused kind of double page spread. Pretty nice art, nothing too fancy, but yeah. And then in general the book is like, it's written like a normal kind of Star Wars Expanded Universe novel, but there's not as many words per page, and they don't try and create too complex of a plot. So I feel it's trying to be the best of both worlds, in that it's expanding the universe, but it's also open for people who just want who watch the movie and just want a little bit extra. So I think it's a kind of perfect blend in terms of readability. But yeah, Finn's section of the book is obviously what starts us off here. And effectively, we just get the fact that Finn is, at the start of this book, a cadet in a four-man fire team of stormtroopers in the First Order. They're doing simulation, kind of virtual, kind of simulations of combat against the Resistance and stuff like that. And he is in a squad with obviously three other guys. And you get like the kind of clone trooper style naming convention for them. So Finn is obviously FN 2187, and he doesn't have a nickname. He's the only one on his fire team, and one of the only guys in the whole cadets who doesn't have a specific nickname. Like there's a guy in his fire team called FN 2199, and they call him Nines because of the names. Another guy is FN 2000, and they call him Zeros, obviously because of the number. And then the other guy on his fire team, FN 2003, is given the nickname Slip because he's the one who's struggling the most with the training, and so he slips up a lot, so that's why I call him that. And then they very much play on the fact that he only gets his name in The Force Awakens from Poe, and that he's so focused on trying to be the best stormtrooper who he can be, and he's excelling at basically every single one of these drills. He is the leader of his fire team. Captain Phasma, who you get a little bit of extra detail on in this story, thinks that he has the potential to be one of the best stormtroopers she's ever trained, and sees a lot of potential in him really well. And that's what I like about this book. They really kind of set up this weird relationship between Phasma and Finn, in the sense of she had so much faith in him being really strong, and she gradually becomes more and more let down with him when he's put into like the real situations. And that kind of builds to The Force Awakens, where she's the first one to really see that like he's not cut out for this, and so he makes that kind of first infraction, and she kind of understands where it comes from. And potentially I would hope that going forward in the movies they kind of set that up as a kind of feud, that's a fight that we're going to see in 8 or 9, like Finn versus Phasma, the guy who had the potential to be the best stormtrooper versus, I assume, Phasma is meant to be the best stormtrooper. So that's a pretty cool thing there. And yeah, so you have the fact that mainly they focus on his relationship with Slip. The other two are just kind of there. They're kind of above average stormtroopers who can keep up with Finn but aren't as good as him, and that they need to be led by him. And then Slip is the one kind of bringing the team down, and the team is kind of suffering because of him. But Finn is always making up for his weakness, and he's going back to save him in these drills. And Phasma is like, your fire team is amazing, primarily because of you, Finn, but your compassion for him and going back to him and kind of being so like camaraderie, like no man left behind basically. Finn has that mentality, and Hux and Phasma, who are overseeing this, are like, no, that's a problem for the First Order. That means you're loyal more to your comrades than the higher ups like Snoke and stuff like that, and they've specifically mentioned that a few times. And then the rest of it's basically just kind of establishing more of what their kind of training is. You see them go through some kind of hand-to-hand combat training, as this picture shows, in that Finn never uses that weird lightsaber blocking weapon, but the book does mention that weapon exists, that there is some of these weapons that can block lightsabers. And just these kind of moments where he takes on board what Phasma says and doesn't try to help Slip as much, but is kind of gradually becoming to feel more and more not part of this. They establish that even though he's the leader of this fire team, because he is the one who doesn't have a nickname, he's seen as the one who's kind of the most outside of all of his kind of group of cadets, because he doesn't see things in the same way they do. He's the best, he's the leader, he does everything that he needs to do, he's the one who's meant to be amazing. But he's also the one who doesn't have anything so unique about him that they can give him a nickname. And that really comes out. And then when he eventually goes on his first mission, it's this weird kind of negotiation that the First Order are having with this planet. And basically Phasma's negotiating, and she tells them to come in. And basically I think the guy just says like, okay, so what do you think about our terms? Phasma walks out and says, kill them. So she basically orders Finn's fire team to kill all the people they were just negotiating with. and nines, nines and zeros kill their guy perfectly fine. Slip kills his guy and basically kind of redeems himself in the eyes of Phasma, who is almost like on the verge of kind of dropping him out of the program almost because he was failing so much. But seeing, I suppose, his ruthlessness, that he just, like she said, fire, and he just killed the guy. And then Finn pauses on this order, and Slip kills the guy that Finn was meant to kill. But she doesn't really say much about this, but she kind of notes it. So you know that's kind of the redemption for Slip, and Finn gradually beginning to see that, like, I'm not like these guys. Like, she said fire, they shot. I questioned, and it's basically him just beginning to have a conscience about what the First Order really is. Like, when some of the other people that he meets first see him, they don't see him as some sort of liberator or anything like that, being a stormtrooper. They're just terrified of him, and that's it just kind of shows him that he's on the wrong side. And then basically the book comes to an end with Phasma basically say, okay, you've done a few things now, you've failed a few drills now, you're beginning to kind of question things in the wrong way. I'm now going to send you out on one mission with the rest of your crew. If you fail this, you know, basically this is your last chance. If you don't impress on this mission, something's going to happen. And they kind of allude minorly to, like, the fact that they're programmed, you know, raised from birth to be stormtroopers that don't have names, and like that Finn may have to have some reprogramming done. So I really like the way it ends, in that, like, it's clear that the mission they're going on next is the raid on Jakku, with Lor San Tekka and stuff like that. And obviously, like in The Force Awakens, what happens? She orders a blaster inspection for him, and it's clear he hasn't fired his weapon at all. So that's interesting. So, you know, but Finn's is probably the kind of least interesting part of the book, just because I think the movie did a good enough job at getting across his, like, change in conscience and his explanations. It was nice to see, I suppose, where it came from in this book, in that it's definitely worth reading. And I'd say it is a good part of the book. The next section is Rey, and as I said at the start of the video, it focuses on basically a year time period, but it starts off basically with the fact that she's struggling to find parts that Unkar Plutt will give her a decent amount of portions from, she's really struggling with finding enough food to eat, water to have. And then she's out scavenging one day and just spots this she's this glint basically out in the middle of nowhere. She kind of uncovers some sand and finds basically a full kind of ship that's capable of hyperspace, but there's enough damage to it that it's going to be a pretty big job, but it's not so destroyed that it's not like it's awful. And, like, you get explanations for, I suppose, how she knows how to fly, and that she found these kind of simulator programs for how to fly and kind of put some scrap together to basically make a way for it to work. So she's done a lot of simulation flying with this program, and so that's why she knows how to fly ships. And then just her job as a scavenger is why she knows how to kind of put stuff together and is basically a mechanic and stuff like that. So that's all explained pretty well. But anyway, she finds this ship and kind of thinks to herself that it's the perfect way to kind of ease all of her problems with regards to food. That if she can fix this ship up properly and have it working, not only working but, like, able to fly, not just able to fly, able to go to hyperspace, that he will have to give her like 10,000 portions, enough to last for her for years. And she also is in part doing this not just for the food, but to kind of show up Unkar Plutt and that, like, look what I found, look at this thing I found. I'm going to have you desperate to give me, like, as much portions as I want to do. She wants to kind of see him desperate to give her portions for stuff. And so she begins to, she basically doubles her work. She's doing work day to day to get her normal portion so she can live. but she's also finding scrap as a scavenger to repair this ship. And like some other people, like these two other characters, let me just find their names again. Um, Devi and Strunk. These other two scavengers kind of notice that she's doing this and basically come on board. And she's very distrustful of them. You find out throughout this book like that she's very much keeps to herself. She doesn't want to involve anyone else in any of this. She has long come to like learn to fight for herself and trust no one. And eventually she begins to trust these two because there's this moment where like some Tito's, the people she meets in the movie that she kind of scares off with BB-8, they come to take the ship, and it's revealed that Devi and Strunk have kind of stayed behind to kind of protect the ship. And so she basically begins to trust them like perfectly here. And then by the time they have the whole thing fixed and ready to go, basically they fly the ship over to Unkar Plutt. And as she's basically outside demonstrating how it works, the other two take off with the ship, and that's basically just where the book ends. Like, it's just like the ship goes off, Rey went on with her life. And the interesting thing here is that the second that they came in on the plan, there was always a difference of opinion about what to do with it in the end once they had it done. That these two suggested from the start that they repair the ship to leave Jakku, where she had always wanted to give it into Unkar Plutt for portions so she could live there longer. And this ties into her, probably one of her main arcs in the movie, that being about how she's sticking to the past. She's waiting for her parents to return, though she doesn't know if they will ever return. And so that's what's kind of gluing her to the planet. And it takes all of the events of The Force Awakens for her to realize that she has to move on, that her parents aren't coming back, it's been so long. And this book kind of highlights the way she is, that this ship, she could have left the planet, she could have found a better place for herself. She's resourceful, she can handle herself, she has skill that could do very well for her on other planets. She could make a great life for herself if she left on that ship that she made with the other two. But she chose to stay behind on this planet, eat the bad food, get as many portions as she wants, just for the hope that her parents one day return. And like I like how clearly they set that up, that she has no desire to leave the planet at this point in time. It's really well done. It's a simple story of basically she strikes it rich. You know, she has this ship, she repairs it. They're all amazed by the fact that she's put this thing together, and she has everything set, but then they just take off. She trusts them the whole time, and then they just steal the ship at the end, and she just has no response to this. And let me just and yeah, basically they do a test flight earlier on in the book just before they give it over to Unkar Plutt, and she's so amazed by what it feels like to fly a real starfighter. And it's so different than at the end of the book. The book basically ends with just she selected a Gatroc 720, a suborbital flight with calm atmospheric conditions and no complications. Rey flew, but it wasn't the same. So she uses the kind of simulator again, but it doesn't feel the same as an actual plane does. And this is just that one moment at the end where there's a tiny piece of her that wishes she had went with them, but that at this point in time, before The Force Awakens happens, she is set in stone staying on Jakku. And it was just a really good story focusing on that. So it was really nice to see that, and just get some more detail on how the whole Unkar Plutt station works and stuff like that. It's pretty well done. Overall, I'm just trying to look through this again quickly. Obviously, yeah, Nema Station and stuff like that. So yeah, Poe's section of the book. This is the last section, and as I said, his is the most interesting because you don't just get like what he was doing just before The Force Awakens. You get a transition from the Republic Navy to the Resistance. You get a little bit of his backstory, finding out about his parents, and you find out a actually a decent amount about them. His mother's name, where is it here? His mother's name was Shara Bay, and then his father's name is Kez Dameron. So he has his father's name. But what they said up here is that his parents were both in the rebellion. His mother was basically an ace pilot who was part of basically the attack on the second Death Star and all this other stuff. They set it up that she's really amazing. But when we meet Poe in this book, she has died a couple of years previously. I think they mentioned that his father's still alive, but he's fairly old at this point in time. But that he was involved on the ground at the Battle of Endor and met Han Solo and stuff like that. And I like what they do here. It's actually really well done. They do this thing where, like, when he was growing up, he talks about how he'd always asked his parents about their involvement with the rebellion. And his mother hadn't told him anything, and he had to find out from other people later on how amazing she was. His father talked a little bit more openly about it, but always about the people around him and not necessarily what he himself did. And the one really truthful thing that his father told him was that when the second Death Star kind of fell, and afterwards he was like, I was happy to be a part of it, but like, was it what that he's afraid? The only thing he was ever afraid of in the rebellion was that everything they were doing was for nothing, and that this is kind of the theme of this thing for Poe, in that, given what we know about the Force Awakens, and that like we did everything we could to take down the Empire, but now the First Order's back and they seem almost worse. Was the rebellion all for nothing? And then Poe, who we then find out is part of the Republic Navy, creating a separation between the Republic, who the Navy, the official Navy of the Republic, considered the Resistance to be not as bad as the First Order, but the same type of thing, this kind of rebellious faction that can't forget about the war is kind of the way they see them. But Poe gradually begins to see that like the Republic is doing nothing about the First Order. We've gone on these random scouting runs, not expecting to encounter any resistance, and we've been forced into fights against the First Order, appearing in like neutral space, doing stuff they're not meant to, and why aren't we reacting to this? I'm ready to lead my squadron in and take them out if necessary. But the Republic commander is like, no, we're not doing that, and the idea of the resistance comes up, and the commander kind of, kind of shushes them off, like, no, the resistance are just as bad as the First Order, we'll do what we're meant to do. And throughout this you're also learning a little bit about his kind of squad mates. Early on in the first battle, one of his 4 pilots dies, and he kind of sees the death of this kind of character as the reason for why the Republic isn't doing anything. That like, they killed one of our pilots, the First Order. Why aren't we striking back? And so him and his other 2 pilots are just fiercely loyal to him. They basically go on this patrol mission on their own and scout out where the First Order are, like what they're getting up to. And he comes back from this, barely makes it out alive, all 3 of them. And then out of nowhere, they're kind of just introduced to Leia and some of the Resistance kind of higher ups. And she basically just tells him, like, I'm very interested in what you just did. You see the really interesting relationship that he has with Leia, in that I wouldn't say it's quite, like, given that his mother's died, that she's kind of taking the role of his mother somewhat. It's more of a kind of, she sees a little bit of Han in him and is aware of the type of pilot that he is. She sees a little bit of Luke, a little bit of Han, a kind of mix of the two in him, and kind of knows how to handle him. And that, like, we need people that are, aware of how confident they are, aware of how skilled they are, a little bit cocky, and knows how to handle him. That she jokes around with Poe a little bit, but gets serious when she needs to, and just kind of basically says, do you want to join the Resistance? And he says yes, and then his other 2 squadron mates join up with him, and then they just establish a little bit of time passes. They all become leaders of their own squadrons, but the other 2 are still loyal to Poe and will follow him into battle regardless. And that's when Poe goes on this mission to investigate this member of the Republic Senate, who the Resistance suspects is basically allied with the First Order and is like leaking information and like basically helping them to get back into power. And so it turns out that's exactly the case, that when they launched their attack on his ship to kind of find out if it's the truth, he put out a distress beacon, and immediately the First Order arrives. Like, they don't just send a couple of ships to protect him, they send whole Star Destroyers to save him. They managed to get out just barely once again, but Poe now knows for sure he's made the right choice. Just knowing that a member of the Republic Senate was this far into the First Order, he knows he's on the right side fighting them, and he knows how powerful they are. And it's just showing that, you know, this is a guy who's really loyal. He's really loyal to the Republic, but he left the Republic to join this kind of faction that the Republic doesn't like, because he didn't like the way that the Republic were handling the First Order officially, so he joined the Resistance and has a huge respect for Leia. And basically it's explaining why Leia comes to see Poe as her most trusted pilot, her most daring, her most, her best pilot, basically. What's in the opening credits to The Force Awakens, what it says about Poe, it explains that perfectly, setting up what he's doing. And we end with basically Leia informing Poe about the mission to go and get the information from Lor San Tekka to find about where Luke is. And I just think that it's a really well done one. I know Poe has been the kind of surprise breakout, like, fan favorite character from the movie that has developed a huge fan base despite not being in it all that much. So again, if there's anything I'd say about this book, if you're a fan of Poe Dameron, read this book. It's really well done in terms of characterizing him, giving information on his backstory, parents, the way he feels about his squad mates and stuff like that. It's very well done. Not to say that the Rey section or the Finn section are like bad or anything like that. No, they're really good. It's just that kind of Poe is a character who needed this more than the other two. But I feel that those two sections do an exceptional job at just expanding on the general idea that they were going for in the movie with those two. And in the sense of this being a prequel book, like setting that up, it's exceptionally well done. So I think it's written pretty well, easy to follow, really quick read. I read this in about like 2 hours, over the course of 2 hours. It was very quick to read. So there's the cover once again. Star Wars Before the Awakening came out the same day as the movie did. Definitely check it out. It's a pretty cheap book as well. It's only like, it says £7.99. I think it was €10 here. So definitely, if you can find it. It seems to have sold pretty well. When I checked on Amazon, it wasn't in stock. So it seems like people are buying this book and want it. But I would definitely recommend this book. So that's been the review. In the comments, if you read the book or have any thoughts on some of the stuff I've talked about here, definitely let me know in the comments below. Other than that, thanks for watching this video, and bye.